Alain de Botton has a wonderful YouTube video I recommend on that's, I think the title is You're Going to Marry the Wrong Person. Fantastic short video.
Yeah.
Don't show it to my wife because she thinks she married the right person. I don't want her to see it and it'll depress her. But seriously, there's no best. And part of the theme of my book is that most of life is a matrix. By that, I don't mean like the movie, the red or blue pill. What I mean is that it's a set of complicated attributes that are pluses and minuses for all kinds of things. So the person you're with, that you're seeing now, whoever's listening out there, there's a certain level of attractiveness, there's a certain level of sweet kindness, there's a certain level of intelligence, or a certain level, many, many, many attributes. And then there's chemistry and sexual attraction. We've got all those things working. And so which is the best one? Oh, well, I need a formula to add up all those measurements so I can get a single number, and then I'll just pick the one that gets the best score. And I'd argue that's the wrong way to think about life. It's the wrong way to think about how to pick your friends. It's the wrong way to think about how to find the best job. It's the wrong way to think about most things. And it's not just because you can't find the best one. It's not even well defined. And I think that's helpful. Again, doesn't make it easy to still pick the one you're going to marry. But, I give a short list of, like, pick somebody you respect, whose company you enjoy, you can talk to forever, can share your secrets with, you have some chemistry. That's great. That's so hard to find. Marry them. Ask them. They probably won't marry you, but at least ask them. I think people who stay married for a long time have a wide array of emotional landscapes they live in. I think some of them see their partners as their soulmates through most of their day even, right? It's not just, I think of my wife when I go home and I see her and I'm glad to see her. It's that she, or in the case of the other side, they fill my soul and day-to-day life. It gets back to what I was talking about earlier. It's not just, they're fun to be with. It's that they create an overarching sense of identity of they're part of who I am. By the way, Darwin didn't think about that because he'd never experienced it. Not just that he hadn't been in love, he never crafted a life with another person. That's what a real marriage is, by the way. It's not just that it's convenient, that there's economies of scale, because you don't have to, you can go to Costco more often if you have kids and a wife, so you can get a lower unit price on the ketchup. That's not what it's about. What it's about is a journey. It's a journey that two people share. And you said looking for a life partner. It's not so fashionable, right? Most people aren't necessarily looking for a life partner. I'm not. And by the way, many negatives about a life partner. There are many positives about a life partner. It's complicated. But when you ask me, I would ask your question this way. What suffuses you? What are you overwhelmed by when you're with that person for decades? And it's not every day, and it's not every night, and it's not every vacation, right? But the ideal is that much of the time you're filled with something. The word would be love. You call it love, affection, whatever. But the reason I like your question is that, part of my book is asked this looks at these decision makers where they say things like, well, I made the list of pluses and minuses and it came out wrong. So I added some pluses. Or the poem I mentioned by Piet Hein, who was a scientist and a mathematician, who says, when you can't make a decision, flip a coin. And when it's in the air, you'll know what you're rooting for. You're rooting for heads or tails. And that'll say, that's what you really want.
That's clever.
That whole idea of what you really want is such a strange idea. Because what could you really want that goes above and beyond the pluses and minuses? I mean, that's just irrational. And a lot of smart people have said, not exactly. And by the way, it doesn't mean, therefore you should follow your gut, follow your intuition. That can be very dangerous also, cost you a lot of money, lead you to marry the wrong person. You have to be thoughtful about this. The alternatives aren't use science or just follow your gut. I don't think either one is the right way to think about these kind of decisions.
this part because I don't really delve into it, and that is the notion of checklists, of what you insist upon when you date. I personally have a very basic checklist. I envision, to go along with this airplane analogy, like the Bermuda Triangle, I envision relationships like getting a plane down the runway, where the relationship itself is when it's in the air. That's what it's all about, but you got to get it into the air. And I always say there are 3 things that you need to get that airplane in the air. It's a very short checklist. Number 1 is you need to be attracted to your spouse. You don't need to think that your spouse necessarily is the most beautiful person in the world, though that is a lovely thing to say and even more lovely to feel. That's fine. I compare it in some ways to thinking that the Gadol Hador, the leading rabbi, do you have to believe that he's the smartest person in the world? No. You have to think that he's smart. You can't think that they are foolish or dumb, God forbid. But you don't need to think that they have the highest IQ in the entire world in order to take their guidance, in order to have them as a leader. In a similar sense, you don't need to necessarily think that your spouse is the most beautiful person in the world. And of course, an obvious exception, in case my wife is listening, she happens to be, coincidentally, been voted, she's been the People magazine most beautiful person in the world, I think 10 years running at least. So I am the exception to this. But I think generally you need to be attracted, you need to be sexually attracted to your spouse. That is number 1. Number 2, once you have attraction, and this is very, I'm going to phrase this very importantly, but I always phrase it the same way. You can have no irreconcilable religious differences. No irreconcilable religious differences. What is an irreconcilable religious difference? That changes from person to person. For some people, that might just be keeping kosher and Shabbos. For other people, that may be wearing a hat and jacket. For other people, that may be covering your hair or wearing skirts or whatever it is. You need to figure out, what are my irreconcilable religious differences? What are things that I will not be able to make a commitment to somebody with these religious differences? And I urge people to be as minimalist as possible. I actually have like a negative theology on this. Don't think, and this is deliberately in contrast to someone who has the same hashkafa as you. As you will hear over and over again, I absolutely hate the word hashkafa. I think the word itself was invented probably, early 80s. I would love for somebody to do a real deep dive etymologically of when the word hashkafa became in vogue. It means like your outlook on life. I don't believe that you need to have somebody with the same hashkafa as you. I know so many healthy marriages where you have different hashkafas of one degree or another. You need to ensure that you don't have any irreconcilable religious differences. You can't have somebody who wants to keep kosher and serve not kosher there. You can't have somebody who insists on a certain, religious commitment and their spouse is undermining that. That is how I phrase it. I think hashkafa becomes too nebulous, and most people do not spend the remainder of their marriage debating hashkafa. You think about the culture of your home, you think about the religiosity of your home in broader senses, but that emerges after the commitment. And I don't like a long checklist of, irreconcilable religious differences, because honestly, our religious lives change, and you just want to make sure that there are very clear red lines that you are signing up for, and different people have different red lines, and it's okay to have more either expansive or very restrictive red lines. You have to figure out what works for you. And finally, the last part is being able to spend long, unstructured time together. I think dating, in a way, is not a great way to figure out whether you can live with a person, and living with a person sometimes is not the right way to figure out if you can live with a person. So a lot of problems obviously start with that, aside from halachic issues, which we're not even going to get into, of course. But I like being able to spend long, unstructured time together. I had a family member who actually did something quite brilliant. They took a long drive together to a common destination. I think they were both going to the same wedding for Shabbos or same Ufra for something like that. And they took like a 4 or 5 hour drive together to get to someplace for Shabbos. I think that's a great way to figure out, can we spend unstructured time together where, we are kind of looking at our phones, we're making phone calls, going to pit stops, we're picking up food, drinks, or whatever it is. Long, unstructured amounts of time together. We enjoy being in each other's company when it's not an activity, when it's not a Build-A-Bear or paint night or whatever it is. Long, unstructured periods of time. That doesn't mean 36 hours together. I am not saying that. I'm saying like a long drive where you're going, you're going to an out-of-town wedding together and you're driving, 3 hours to Baltimore and you're driving back and you're spending time at the wedding, but it's not structured, it's not programmed. That is always my checklist that I advise people. You have to be attracted to one another. There could be no irreconcilable religious differences, and being able to spend long, unstructured periods of time together. And really what happens afterwards ultimately is the relationship itself emerges